You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by HomeField Apparel.
Welcome back to CrimsonCast, folks. We flew 2,000 miles to do this podcast. It is Sunday night, and we are still coming down off of the emotional high of the events in Pasadena on Saturday. Both Scott and I were present as Indiana won their first ever game at the Rose Bowl. They absolutely maul UCLA in the Bruins' first Big Ten conference game, 42-13. And you could make an argument it probably shouldn't have even been that close, but for some very opportune calls that went the way of UCLA. Just a complete domination by Indiana, and the capper on what was really an incredible weekend, Scott, not just for me and my family, not just for you, I know, who were out there, but for all of the thousands of IU fans who congregated at the Rose Bowl and in Pasadena leading up to that game. Scott, it's going to be hard for me to put into words exactly how cool this last 48 hours was, but it was great to be able to take it in with you, and just one of those games that suckers you back in to like really getting excited, and maybe for good. You know, maybe this is one of those things where it's not suckering you in, it's actually a statement of a new era. That's how I was feeling more and more as I was on the flight home. But not the kind of game we normally get from IU when we travel, and you couldn't have asked for like a better combination of venue, moment, and result. I'm still giddy. What about you?
So it's basically the opposite of everything from basically most of our other times that we've traveled to games. I'm going to quote, I have it here, and I can't do my audio board with yours, but I have an audio clip here from the great Bill Murray from Ghostbusters. This is what I felt from the game.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass. Did you see it?
So I feel almost all of it. Sorry.
It's funny you say this, because I was thinking as I was on the flight home, I was a lot of random thoughts in my head. I actually think someone needs to design a Kurt Signetti shirt, like him standing in a pose, but like kind of like as a Roman emperor, and just put Veni Vidi Vici underneath it. Just a nice bootleg T-shirt that somebody sells in the parking lot for $10. I would buy one of those in a heartbeat. It did feel like Indiana on the business trip. They just came, they saw, they conquered, and they got the heck out of there.
Or you could do like, put him on the George Clooney body from Up in the Air, and just like, hey, I'm just, flying to Omaha for a job here. No, everything you said was spot on. It was really cool to go. Like, there was a lot of anticipation. We were kind of joking about things. What was cool, we went to an alumni event beforehand. I bumped into a couple people who were at the 68 game. Like, one guy was in the marching 100. He had a huge button and was just like, I'm super excited to come back here. I had dinner with somebody the night before who was also in the marching 100. Like, oddly, I had a lot of marching 100 connections. I didn't go into it that way, but people kind of like coming back, like wanting to, right the wrongs, I guess, of the 68, that Rose Bowl. But everything could not have gone better. A great start. Obviously, you're up 14-0. UCLA's only had one play. At halftime, I met with I was waiting in line for a drink. A couple of people were like, "Oh, Scott from Crimson is great." We're talking in the line, and I kind of was like, "All right." Kind of half joking, but half serious. Like, this, we're kind of in like gots to win territory now. Cause I think it was like 21-3 at that time at half. And it's like, all right, or 21-7. And it's like, all right, this is going to suck if we lose. But we didn't. And like, all of the things that normally happen didn't happen. It was a beautiful venue. It was just a picturesque night, like a little bit warm. The sun went down. It's like exactly what you expect. And then with like 7 minutes to go, you watch UCLA fans filing out. We're waving. The Hoosier contingent was fantastic there. They were being more boisterous during the game than the UCLA fans. So no, it made up for a lot of really bad trips home after kind of getting my tail between my legs from other places where we went. So no, it was a ton of fun for those who didn't go. I think there will hopefully be more of these in the future, because I like you kind of come away feeling like this is the start of something that feels a little more replicatable than maybe we've had in the past.
We got a lot to dive into with this, but first let's talk about the folks that bring this show to you folks. Our title sponsor, HomeField Apparel, sponsor of the entire Back Home Network, which includes, of course, our friends over at Assembly Call, the Doing the Work podcast. The
It might as well have been a sponsor of the Rose Bowl because there was a lot of home field there.
There were so many people wearing so many different types of home field for both schools, which I thought was cool. Like, it wasn't just IU. There was UCLA home field all over the place. I think I saw 40 different that Rags to Roses shirt and one of my friends, she said, like, someone came up to her and was like, "Oh, did you make that yourself?" And she was like, "Yeah, sure. If you give me this, what you're looking for, I could give me $50 and I'll make one for you." It's like, that's a good profit margin there. But no, just so much
code home 23, it's less.
I think this is home 1000, right?
Yeah,
this is the special code that we've been talking about, but. No, HomeField Apparel, so much out there, and it really hits home, I think, when you go to a big venue like this. I mean, we know the HomeField guys, right. the folks that started HomeField Apparel, IU alums, who have taken this thing into the stratosphere, and we always think of them at their core as an IU brand. But to watch how much they have infiltrated college football culture across boundaries, across schools, is really, really awesome to see. And so, folks, if you haven't gotten your own HomeField apparel, you need to go do that now. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Use the code HOME23. Get 15% off your first order. I went right after the game to order the coaching jacket, which I had failed to order when it first came out. I was like, okay, this is going to be my big reward for myself for Indiana winning this game. And, of course, they're all sold out. So I could not get one.
Yeah, I've not got one either. I'm waiting for the refresh.
Yeah. So, get on the mailing list, sign up for the mailing list. They send out great deals on the mailing list. Sign up for the social media accounts. Again, homefieldapparel.com. Your source for all of the best college football apparel. And as we get into college basketball season, they got plenty of that too. Also, just a reminder that we are brought to you in part by Hoosier Game Day Lager, the official craft beer of IU and IU football, and a great way to spend a tailgate, a great way to sit down in the stadium during the Charlotte game coming up this upcoming weekend, which I know all of you are going to be at. Crack open one of those candy striped cans, kick back, and enjoy watching the Hoosiers take on the 49ers. It should be known by now, I think, that of all of the options in Memorial Stadium, I think Hoosier Game Day Lager is the best compromise of flavor and price. And really, if you haven't had a Hoosier Game Day Lager, you need to get one as soon as possible. They're available, of course, in Memorial Stadium, available at all of the Upland locations throughout Central and Southern Indiana, and, of course, pretty much available anywhere that you can purchase beer, Big Red Liquors, whomever out there, Kroger. I mean, everybody's got it. So go get a Hoosier Game Day Lager and be sure to drink responsibly. Also, just a quick reminder, we are on Substack. Go to crimsoncast.substack.com, sign up, and get free emails with our podcast delivered right to your inbox. That allows you to skip the social media queue and really get a chance to find out when we have podcasted, what we've said. And we also try to send out some extra things sometimes, some links and whatnot. We also have VIP videos that we will record occasionally. We have a couple throughout the course of this week that'll reflect on our time out in Southern California. You get those VIP videos if you are a paid subscriber to Crimson Cast. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year. Helps to financially support the podcast. But the free list is still free, and you can join the nearly 1,000 IU fans that have subscribed on the Substack. Please go do so at crimsoncast.substack.com. All right, Scott, let's go ahead and dive into this just from a football perspective first, and then we'll kind of tackle some of the more the more emotional aspects of things, shall we say. Indiana goes into this game. They were a 3.5-point favorite. And I think, I went back and listened as I was driving back from the airport. I went back and listened to the preview podcast that we did last week when we were talking about this game. We were both confident that Indiana was going to win, right? But I said, I'm really not totally sure how these teams are going to match up. There's a real argument to be made that, maybe UCLA is not very good, but there's also an argument that IU may struggle in a road game, a conference game. UCLA may not be as bad as we saw in that Hawaii game. And we just didn't know how IU was going to play against that level of talent. And it's kind of funny to say that now in retrospect, given how the game went. But I think it's important to remember Like, this UCLA team does have talent. They had a bunch of talent on defense. Their defense was really supposed to be their calling card. And Indiana just cut through them throughout this entire game. Indiana comes out and, one of the things that I find fascinating about Cignetti and his team so far is how ready they are to take advantage of things that go their way. And so Indiana gets the ball. They do a 12-play, 75-yard drive that chews up 6.5 minutes, and it results in that touchdown pass from Curtis Rourke to Miles Cross. Then there's a fumble on the next drive. Indiana recovers, and 3 plays later, they're back in the end zone. It's 14-0, and UCLA is entirely on the back foot. And from there, Indiana's win percentage or win probability never dipped, I think, below like 80.4% was the lowest it got. And from the rest of the time, even though there were some nervous moments, Scott, IU had control of the game statistically, and they also just had control of the game in terms of play after play after play, offense and defense. It was a performance that was dominant throughout, but the scoreboard didn't really reflect the dominance until the fourth quarter. But it was good that it did, because I think if this game ends like 28-13, people don't remember how much of an ass kicking this was that IU was able to pull off in this contest.
No, it's true. The stat that there's a lot of stats I want to talk about tonight. There's some high level stats for the season that are pretty amazing, but one that I take away from the game was we were 9 for 12 on third downs. And what was interesting is a lot of that is, first off, we're getting 5 or 6 yards a play. Like, just every play, it's like we're doing a second and 4, or it's a 3rd and 1. But what was interesting is there were a lot of interesting calls, to say the least, that would go against Indiana that would put us, like, take a 3rd and 4 and make it a 3rd and 14. And I don't have the exact number, but it felt like every time that happened, we had a play to get 15 yards. Like, instead of just being like, oh, well, shoot, damn it, this is the end of the drive. Or, it's like, it felt like there was a real steady hand on the team. That's like, all right, let's call this play that we know will get us 15 yards. And, it was, what I also thought was interesting with the game plan as a whole is they kind of ran exactly what they needed to run to get done what they needed to get done. And what I mean by that is, when they were down 3rd and 15, they would run a play to get 16 yards. And then in the fourth quarter, I was telling my friend Teddy, who I was with, that, it's like we're not taking a lot of shots, like just a lot of kind of 5 yards here, 4 yards there. And like, it's great. And then all of a sudden we took like one shot in the end zone, touchdown. And it's like, that was kind of the nail in the coffin. And it felt like Cignetti had almost been sitting on that for the game. He's like, whenever I want to pull this out, I can pull this out. Like, that's the trump card, and then we're done. But it was just that idea of, it's like, whatever the yardage was we needed to get, we got it. Wow. And that was really cool to see. But just, I agree with you. I mean, they came out, they took care of business early. I mean, we're up 14-0. UCLA has run one play. And it's like I texted you, it's like the reverse Iowa game. But then when it got a little bit tight, I think it was like 21-10 there right at the start of the second, right after halftime, it's 21-10. And, I'm immediately, my IU football brain is thinking, damn, it's 21-10. So now it's going to be 21-17 because we'll probably do a 3 and out. They're going to score a touchdown. Like, what, how's it going to go when it's 21-17? It's like, never got there. Like, It just never happened. Never got there. And so that all of those things were some of the things that like most impressed me, especially when you had a UCLA team that was coming in to stop the run. You could tell they wanted to stop our run. And while they contained it, they still contained it to the point where we're getting, 4 yards a carry.
Yeah. It's interesting because obviously we had some concerns about the passing game in the first couple of games for Indiana, but it was largely because the running game was so dominant. And it was clear, at least from my viewing and watching the game, that UCLA was really focused on not letting Indiana get going in the running game. They were jamming the line, and Indiana was gaining, or in the early stages, like 2 yards a carry or 3 yards a carry. Like, it wasn't that much. And you combine that with some penalties, and it put Indiana in some 3rd and intermediate or 3rd and long ranges. And then it was just like Indiana said, all right, we'll pass. And they rarely tried to take deep shots, but the couple of times they did, it paid off. But they had a ton of intermediate routes. They had a bunch of short stuff that they did, and they just never looked rattled. And I think that it's one of the big things that stuck out to me in watching how this team dealt with this whole game. In the macro, this idea that, well, we're going to take away, UCLA saying, we're going to take away the thing that you're best at, that we think you're best at. And Indiana's like, okay, cool. We'll do this other thing instead. And then they start to focus on that. And then Indiana switches back to running the ball primarily in the second half. And UCLA really doesn't have a solution. And they really didn't know who to cover. I mean, I thought it was fascinating when they did start to pay attention to the passing game. You start to realize that, Indiana literally has 6 dynamite options for Curtis Rourke to throw to. I mean, this time Miles Cross leads the team, 6 catches, 90 yards, 15 yards per catch. Omar Cooper, another touchdown, 58 yards. Elijah Surratt had a big pickup, had 4 catches, but Miles Price gets in the action. Keyshawn Williams catches 2 touchdowns. Zach Horton was a key target for Curtis Rourke. I mean, it was just like, it was very, very difficult, you could see in the moment, for UCLA to adapt to what IU was doing. And really the guy that deserves the most credit for that on the field was Curtis Rourke, who just looked unflappable. I mean, there's a great supercut of most of his completions that NBC, I think it was actually Big Ten Network, put this out, that I would recommend going and checking out. I retweeted it on the Twitter. And it's just like there's the play where the snap is low and he almost like loses it and he picks it back up and just tosses it. There's plays where he's like having to switch where he's going very quickly, and he does that. He's looking off defenders and then he's throwing the opposite direction. I mean, the pocket presence that he was able to demonstrate, and just the lack of panic, I think, just in general from this IU team, really shined through in this particular game. I mean, we were talking, and a lot of people had said, there might be 50-50. There might be more IU fans than UCLA fans. There were not, and we'll get to that more later, but it was 80-20 UCLA fans, and they were requisitely loud. Like, it wasn't like they were quiet, at least in those early stages. It didn't rattle Indiana. And even as you said, in that exchange going into the first half, or going into halftime, where they let the touchdown up after the long drive, then UCLA gets the ball back. They go down. Indiana stops them in the red zone. They kick a field goal. You and I talked about this. It's like, this is a little nerve-wracking because we've seen Indiana start to fall apart. These kinds of sequences generally hurt IU. IU just comes right back out and is just like, ho-hum, no big deal, and then marches down the field. And, what was that drive? 9 plays, 87 yards, 4 minutes and 36 seconds. Suddenly it's 28-10. It's a 3-score game. And it's like, all right, you're really going to catch us? And they never did.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Rourke, I will say that I also, again, to the same point, is a lot of times when he would drop back, you'd see him go through his progressions, and then he would just check down to the guy who was wide open in the side. It was normally Horton off to the side. And it's like 3 or 4 times he just would look through and it's like not there. And it's like, but there was a guy just standing wide open on the edge. It's like through there and it's like 6 yards. And it's like, great, take that and we'll see another day. And UCLA was like, well, then when they took that, it's like, that's when he would take the longer, 15-yard shots. You mentioned the drive thing. I want to do this because we have spent many a year doing the drive chart game in kind of a sad.
Yeah, you got to do the name, Scott. Come on.
Name that drive.
No, it's just recite the drives. Come on.
Drive. So we'll start with Indiana. This is their drive chart for this game. It was touchdown, an eight play drive that was, turnover on downs, and then a touchdown, and then we have halftime, and then it's touchdown, and then a punt when the game was officially over.
Yeah.
That's really good. That was Indiana. That was the Indiana team. If you go to UCLA, this is what we're used to. 1 play fumble. The second one, a 14-play, 42-yard drive, but they stuck with a field goal attempt that they miss. 3-play drive for a punt. A 9-play drive for a touchdown, which I'm sure Signetti will let the defense know about. But then the third quarter, here's what I think, this is, again, what's different. A 9-play drive, they just get a field goal. A next one's 11-play drive. They just get a field goal, and then it's interception, punt, and then the game's over.
Yeah.
One of those, I think there was another interception that really should have happened, I think, on that 11-play drive that was called back because of a really bad pass interference call that we one of the many bad calls we can talk about. But to me, what I take away from this is, first off, it's fun to play the drive chart game when we're doing well, but those 2 drives to start the third quarter, a 9-play, 65-yard drive and an 11-play, 66-yard drive for 5 minutes and 6 minutes, respectively, that gets UCLA a total of 6 points. that's again, you're not going to stop everyone 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Like those are big drives for UCLA that took a lot of time that just yielded nothing. And yielded 6 points. And had those both been touchdown drives, the game would have been in a much different place and probably would have been tighter as it got along. But that's really where we held them for field goals. We got touchdowns, and it's very unusual for an Indiana team to kind of normally when you allow a drive that long in a Big Ten game, it's like you kind of peter out in the red zone, and it's like you feel the deflation of even the team just being like, oh, damn it. Like, and sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. Like for a lot of those drives, things went wrong in that drive for the defense, whether there was kind of a very phantom pass interference call. There was another, a couple of them had weird penalties, like a sack that suddenly becomes roughing the passer. But the kind of things that as an IU fan, you're like, oh, that's it. Like, this is where, like, that's the moment where it turns, but it didn't turn any of them. Like they all became drives that ended in field goals. And that's just very unusual for Indiana to happen.
You look at those two drives, I think you've really hit the nail on the head, because the first drive, the one at the beginning of the half, right. UCLA gets down to the 9 of Indiana. It's a 1st and goal, and it's incomplete pass, 1 yard run, 1 yard loss on a run, incomplete pass, 28-yard field goal. The next drive, and at this point UCLA is down 28-10. They get all the way down into the red zone. It's 1st and 10 at the 18. And he goes incomplete pass, 2-yard run, incomplete pass, 34-yard field goal. And then Indiana goes down the field, scores a touchdown. It's 35-13. I don't know what to do with all this competence, Scott. I got like it's funny because I remember, so there's two things here, I guess. And they both relate to how we think about IU football, or how we've been conditioned to think about IU football. I don't care who the coach has been. Jerry DiNardo, Terry Hepner, Bill Lynch, Kevin Wilson, Tom Allen. Indiana has always been so easy to rattle when things don't go their way. And however you want to slice that end of first half, beginning of second half, like that was a rattling sort of circumstance. And now you're only up by 11 points. You're on the road. They've got all the momentum. And it just looked like it didn't matter to Indiana at all. It just was like, all right, we're just going to go back out and do what we do. And that is so different from what we're used to, even in great seasons. I mean, you go back and look at even 2019, go back into 2015, there always felt like there were moments in those seasons where the wheels might fall off the wagon, and then they somehow didn't. This did not feel that way. But the other thing I'll note, and this is kind of specific to the Tom Allen era, the Tom Allen era defensively was always supposed to be, well, they bend, but they don't break. And they let teams drive, and then they don't, they give up a field goal. And then that gradually became less and less true as you went further and further in, and as Kane Womack left, it became, significantly less true. This is legitimately that, where Indiana just didn't break. They let that yardage up. They let that time up, knowing that, well, hey, we're just not going to let them into the end zone. And they didn't let them into the end zone. And eventually, UCLA ran out of field to do things, and they forced field goals. And, it's fascinating to think about it. So far on the season, Indiana, not, a team that we didn't know a whole lot defensively how they were going to do, they have let in a grand total of 23 points through 3 games. It's
averaging 7 points a game, giving up 7 points a game.
I mean, that's nuts. And that is obviously a testament to Curt Cignetti. It's a testament to Brian Haynes and the whole defensive staff, but it's also a testament to the mentality shift, I think, in this program that's already taken place, where it is a point of pride to not let your opposition score on you. And there's not the attitude, well, we'll just get them next time. It's like, no, we're going to get them now. And I really do think that is going to be key for this IU team as they move through the rest of the season. Because if they can pair that type of performance, which they've now done 3 times, with the offense that we have seen in all 3 games, where they're clinical, they're able to run or pass, they're able to shift what they're doing, they're able to play, field possession style of offense where they're just moving the ball very slowly, but they can also take shots down the field. Like, I don't care who you are, that is a really difficult combination to try to deal with as an opponent. And you look down the list of teams Indiana's going to be playing, and they've all got flaws in one way or another. this UCLA game is really kind of the coming out party for Indiana, saying, well, there are certainly some talent flaws. You're not dealing with a roster of 5 stars, but already you're seeing it manifesting in the way Indiana's playing, this steadiness and this kind of unflappability, and that travels real well as you get later into the season.
UCLA, they under 100 yards rushing. They average 3.7 yards a rush. Under 150 yards passing. They end with 142. For the season, I had it right here. Sorry, wrong tab. For the season, Indiana is giving up 1.9 yards a rush, which is just incredible. The average passer rating for the opponents is under 100. It's 95, and they're giving up on offense just 3.3 yards a play. Now, again, you could say, all right, 2 of the opponents are kind of bad to start off, but this is what I was talking about to some people this morning at the airport. It feels like a different time ago, but is that, even if you say, all right, UCLA may not be a great Big Ten team, I don't think they're the worst, but let's say maybe they're a bottom tier Big Ten team. My retort is, okay, but this is what good Big Ten teams do to bad Big Ten teams. They go on the road and really kick the snot out of them. Like this is kind of what like the Penn States and Ohio. I'm not saying we're at that level yet, but like that little tier right behind, normally Michigan and Ohio State, that kind of Penn State, Wisconsin when they're rolling, Iowa when they're playing well, they can't quite do it because they can't score enough. But those kinds of teams at that level, like when Michigan State's having one of those 10-2 seasons, like this is what they do. Like this is what a top tier upper echelon Big Ten team does on the road to a bad opponent. Yeah. So that is also something to just be like, oh, well, UCLA sucks, so this means nothing. It's like, no, it means something. It means that if we continue to play subpar teams, which it looks like we're going to, like this, there is something there.
Yeah, I really see no rationale whatsoever to minimize the result in this game. And I do think that it is ultimately a 42-13 win on the road against any Big Ten team when you are not Ohio State or you are not Michigan last year is an accomplishment and is one that, I don't think UCLA is a very good team. I also don't think they're the worst team in the conference. I mean, I think that's
caveat Michigan as we give them the upper tier. I like when we give them a little. Anyway, just go ahead.
But it's like, that. What I mean is, Ohio State winning at Rutgers like 55-3, or winning at Indiana 51-3, like they did last year, whatever the score was. It's like that's got to be graded on a curve because you have an overwhelming amount of talent. You probably should be beating that team by that amount. You still get some credit for it, but for a team that's not in that upper echelon of talent to go on the road, in an environment where you are clearly the road team and just execute to the level where you win 42-13. That is something that, as you just said, normally that's what good Big Ten teams do. And I think, for all the people who have been holding out saying, well, they haven't really done anything against good competition. Okay, if you want to discount this one by suddenly saying, as I've noticed some people online say, well, UCLA is probably the worst team in the Big Ten. It's like, first, they're not. Northwestern exists. Purdue exists. That's 2. And you if you're not in the bottom 2, like you're somewhere in the morass of the middle of the conference, as far as I'm concerned. But Indiana was a 3.5-point favorite in this game, and they won by 29.
And not to mention all the talk of, before the season, like, oh my God, going east to west is going to be tough for those teams. Right. It's like that also was not a factor at all.
Yeah. So I think if you want to continue to caveat what Indiana's doing, so be it. I'm really excited by the performance. I'm really excited by that level of performance for 4 quarters. It wasn't like they let off the gas there in the fourth quarter. They actually poured it on. That is what you have to do, and that is what instills confidence in this team. And I'm just so impressed, not just with the poise related to that sequence at the end of the first, beginning of the second, or the poise of being able to play the full 60, but a lot of those penalties just artificially kept drives alive for UCLA. I mean, it just looked incredibly blatant that we got to keep UCLA in this game somehow. There wasn't really another good explanation for a lot of the calls that were made, and it didn't bother Indiana at all. It was like, okay, fine. We'll go back out and play good defense for another couple of drives. And it was one of those things, again, where we're just used to a certain level of mental fragility with IU football. And it's really heartening through 3 games to not see that come through at all. And instead to watch an Indiana team be opportunistic and not be daunted. They almost look like they're never daunted. Also, I'll note, and maybe the last kind of football thing I want to mention before we talk about the overall atmosphere, another game where Indiana does not turn the ball over. They have yet to turn the ball over in the 2024 season. They're at a +6 turnover margin. They turned UCLA over twice. They probably should have turned them over 3 times, but for one of those aforementioned terrible penalties. That's probably, I don't think you're going to go through a whole season where you don't turn the ball over, but the fact that this is starting to become a theme where Indiana takes care of the football and causes the opponent to have at least one mistake that yields points or good field position. Again, big change over what we've seen the last couple of years, and certainly something that is really promising as we head into this middle portion of the season.
The last thing I'll hit on is, there's 4 penalties for the team in the game. I think 2 of them were really early false starts, which kind of was a little bit uncharacteristic. But, again, this is something where, we're less penalized than UCLA. So we only had 4 penalties in the entire game. And again, some of those, I feel like 2 of those were very, very suspect calls, and 2 were early false starts. It's a team that doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And when they start, you have those first 2 false starts that you could see like, all right, didn't happen again. Like it gets resolved. And that's, this is something where, if you're, I know that people are, fans outside are going to be like, oh, 19 and 2020, like you got all fired up about, IU and Tom Allen. It's like, but if you go back and listen to the podcast, you and I, even during those periods, were like, it was still a sloppy team. It's like they were getting things done, but it was still sloppy. This team, like we've continued to say, is just, it's not. It's very disciplined, and it just doesn't look like it makes a lot of those mistakes. And so it was good to see, again, another game where there's just not a lot of what I would call like sloppy penalties, just penalties where it looks like people are kind of just not doing the right thing or haven't been, it's like the 2 false starts were really the only ones I would call sloppy penalties. And then it just went away after that first drive.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have been more impressed in general. With how much of a team performance this was. I think Curtis Rourke was clearly, the best player for Indiana throughout the course of the game.
Yeah.
But again, Aiden Fisher had a great game. You had a different group of defensive players step up behind him. Jalen Walker had a great game. Amari Farrell looked great, had one of the 2 sacks that Indiana had in the contest. I mean, it's really, really exciting to watch Indiana get group contributions from their defense, group contributions from their receiving core. Tyson Lawton did not have a great running game, but Justice Ellison, 10 carries, 47 yards. Elijah Green had some nice carries there at the end. It's just cool to see that there are a lot of pretty high-level replaceable parts, or interchangeable parts, not replaceable parts, but interchangeable parts, where it's not so much mattering that you have one lead person that's doing everything in one area. It's a collective effort. And it does seem like that's the kind of thing that we thought we might get out of Cignetti, but we didn't know if we would get it this quickly. And I'm really excited in a game against live competition on the road that what we saw in those first 2 games, we actually saw more of, I would argue, in this game in a lot of phases.
Well, and real quickly, like that would be like the question is to you, like who's our number 1 receiver right now? And I say it because like I'm not sure. It's every game is a little bit different. Like I would say Surratt has been really good, but he only had 4 catches, didn't have a touchdown. Williams had 2 touchdowns in this game. It's like it feels like the lead receiver is the one who's open, which sounds so stupid and so coach speak, but it is kind of the way this team looks to be operating, which is like Rourke's just going to find the open guy. And of those 5 or 6 receivers, I'm not sure who the sole number 1 lead receiver is, which again is kind of different from where we've been, because we've had good receiving cores at IU, but it's like, oh, well, James Hardy, like that's our number 1 guy. When we get to the red zone, we're taking 3 shots at him or something. It's like, we don't do that. We just go to the guy that's open, which again sounds so simple.
Or on the flip side, it's like, well, Micah McFadden, like that's the core of our defense. And that is, there's nothing inherently wrong with it if you can get away with it, but it is interesting and very different, I think, that instead of relying on one amazing player to do what they do, Indiana has been getting these collective efforts, and I am really fascinated to see how that carries on throughout the course of this season.
Yeah.
So anyway, a huge win for Indiana, 42-13. One thing I was thinking about, we talked about this a little bit in the airport. I was trying to think of the last time I left a game with the feeling that I had leaving the Rose Bowl. Like that mix of just unbelievable joy and also kind of surprise that it went as well as it did. And I can really only come up with a couple off the top of my head. The last game like this was really, I think it was the bucket game in 2015. When Indiana, they went in that game 5-6. They had to win the game. Purdue wasn't good that year, but Indiana had been so up and down. And Indiana just absolutely just destroys Purdue in that contest. IU rushes the field, and the fans rush the field at the end. I remember walking out of that game having a similar kind of vibe around me where I was just like, I can't believe what just happened. I'm so happy. I kind of walked around in a daze for a little bit. I felt that way coming out of the game last night. For those who saw the video that I posted after the game, and for those who are on Substack who are not on X, I will post it on the Substack as a free video. It's a little out of date now, obviously, because you're hearing the full podcast. That was just my immediate reaction, but it was just so gratifying from a fan perspective to watch an Indiana team play that well on the road. And look, you and I talked about it. We were confident Indiana winning, but we were talking about, they're going to keep it a close game, this and that. Not they're going to go out and essentially curb stomp UCLA. That was, I got off the plane in Denver connecting, and there's a guy in a wheelchair sitting there, middle-aged guy, but he looks at what I'm wearing right now. I'm still wearing what I was wearing on the plane. He's like, "You're at the game?" I'm like, yeah. He's like, "Oh, congratulations on kicking our ass." Like it was that kind of vibe. We had a nice conversation. I will say the level of hatred that UCLA fans have for Chip Kelly. Like if we could bottle that and harness it, it would replace the search for nuclear fusion as like the renewable resource of the future. I mean, we need to get into that at some point, but man, these people hate Chip Kelly, and I understand why more and more after seeing it. But that aside, it is fascinating to me how effective and how awesome Indiana was and how good that made me feel. And how few times I've felt that traveling for Indiana football games. Like it really there hasn't been a lot of that historically.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone to a lot of wins for Indiana football where I've gone. I mean, so I don't really have an answer to that. I mean, the only one that I could think of that was like shocking in a different way was when we beat Missouri on the road when they were ranked. But and this is all off memory, I feel like we had lost a game before that was kind of perplexing, like Bowling Green or something. Like we had lost a funky game before that, and then. Again, I will do Fever Dream Scott here at some point at the end of the podcast, but that was also a year where it's like I think we had a pretty rough Big Ten schedule ahead of us. Like, again, the thing that is so different about this is everything has felt good up to this point. We, like you said, curb stopped UCLA in the Rose Bowl. And when I look ahead the next 4 to 5 weeks, I don't see, Ohio State, Penn State. I don't see the roadblocks that normally happen. Like I see smooth sailing ahead as well. I really cannot remember a moment in time where it feels like things were on the right track and I could see it kind of continuing to go nicely for a 5 or 6 week span ahead while we're in Big Ten play.
Yeah. I mean, the sky's the limit. And I don't see, look, I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting this to be I
do love, like, there was a moment near the end of the game. We found each other in the stadium. Like, there was a lot of like, this is in the moment, just like, where are the losses? Like, I don't just yelling at each other. Where are the losses?
No, but it's like I was texting people today, and I texted our friend Taylor Lehman at Bite Size Bison. I was like, what's the ceiling? He's like, the ceiling's 11 wins at this point. And I mean, that's hard to get your head wrapped around. And look, I don't think that's actually going to happen. We both predicted 8-4 before the season started, and people thought we were crazy. Many people did. Like, ooh, look at the optimism. It's like, whatever. I mean, this was exactly what I was hoping, and I knew there was the possibility that this would happen. But
we both picked a loss at UCLA. I think in our preview, we both picked a loss at UCLA.
I think you picked the loss at UCLA. I'll go back and check.
Okay.
I think I had this one as a win, but anyway, we're not fighting for credit here.
Yeah, but we're also we are in. Hey, the rankings came out. We're in others receiving votes now.
Yeah,
Like we're others receiving votes.
I predicted 34-30 Indiana would win at UCLA. So I did pick that. You were the one I think that picked the loss, and I think you had us beating like Nebraska or Wisconsin or Washington. But anyway,
yeah.
We'll see. It's more to me like watching Indiana play as well as they did, and the ability of that, the 60-minute game and how that made me feel just as a fan. This is very qualitative. It's very individual, but I've seen a ton of Indiana games. I've traveled to a lot of Indiana games, and I don't think I'll feel that way again this season because I now have higher expectations. I've now seen them do it against a live opponent on the road.
Yeah.
Like it will, I'll never have that kind of innocent.
Yeah, the ride up is always more fun than
the innocent aura. And I'm glad for that. Like I want to shed that. I want to actually feel like I can lean on this team as a fan and say to myself, I believe in them and I believe I can speak strongly and positively about them. And that win last night and the way that they accomplished it, they're not going to win every game on their schedule. I still think 8-4 is a great target number for a team that's at this much new. There'll be more film of Indiana now. I mean, there's a lot of different things that'll happen throughout the course of the season. There's injuries. But it was really, really gratifying walking out of there. And I reflected on how few times I've really been able to have that particular feeling with an Indiana team. And all three of those games were special. Like those were kind of the last two big breakthroughs. Like, that bucket game in 2015 got Indiana back to a bowl for the first time in 8 years. And the game in 2019 was really what pushed Indiana over the hump. Yep. And instead of being a team that was going to struggle to get to a bowl, it was like, well, which bowl are we getting to? And so it was a similar kind of feeling last night. Anyway, let's jump into the atmosphere just in general. I mean, I want to start off by saying this. We were in Pasadena for a couple of days. I got there Wednesday night. I had some work obligations out there. But we were both in town Thursday and Friday and Saturday. And it was cool because you could see the IU presence slowly building throughout the course of those 2 days. And I mean, the local news even did a package on it that got retweeted by Amanda Pavelka. If you want to go check that out, I think we retweeted it too. But it was just cool because it was noticeable, the number of IU fans there. And then in that whole lead up before the game on Saturday, you had tons of IU people down in Old Town Pasadena. We were in a bar and I had just randomly chosen it. I texted you. I was like, should we do a meetup at noon? And you couldn't go, but you gave me a couple options and I chose one. And we went in there and I told a few people and it was 98% Indiana fans. They were literally like, there were a couple of people who were clearly not there to watch football and everybody else was IU fans. And that was really cool. And we saw a bunch of people there that we knew and were friends with. And I went up to talk to the bartender when I was closing out my tab, and he was like, you guys really filled this place up. Everybody's been real friendly. It's been amazing. And it was cool to hear that. And that was a sentiment I heard from a bunch of people throughout the course of our time. It was just so awesome to watch so many people for an Indiana football game come to that kind of a location and be there. And just kind of that level of energy that you can get from being part of the traveling fan group. I don't know if I've ever felt it quite as keenly as I felt it in Pasadena this past weekend.
Yeah, it was. I felt the same thing. I was out Friday or bumping around Pasadena and just bumping into a lot of IU people. I'm wearing an IU hat, and it's like you start. It's kind of cool to kind of see it start growing and building. And there was the IU Alumni Association did a very cool tailgate before the game. That there's over 1,000 people there. It was huge.
It was 1,200 was what they told me. Yeah,
it was. I mean, it was. Everyone was jovial, was excited. Was talking about it, and a lot of people had this kind of the same sentiment that I had. Is like, if IU ever goes to the Rose Bowl, I'm going. It's like even if it's not the Rose Bowl game, it's like it's at the Rose Bowl. I'm going, and I want to see this. And like we said, there was. I met people who were at the game in '68. Like it was a really cool vibe. And then when you got into the stadium, I was talking to a few friends about this. It was really surreal just being like, we're playing UCLA, it's Big Ten. But, when we went to like Iowa, there's a little bit of history there where, Iowans are kind of making fun of their defense and they're kind of like making fun of us because we suck. And then they're kind of nice. And like you go to Purdue, obviously there's a lot of, back and forth. And It's like with the Big Ten, you have a feel for teams. I was joking. This is like two fan bases being on a first date where you're just like, I do love walks on the beach and like, oh no, like your in-laws sound fantastic. Let's travel with them. And no, we'll just, I didn't see the thing on your foot. Like you look great. Like you look awesome. It's like, no, I'll pick up the tab. Like there was no real animosity. Like
we just went deep into Scott's early dating psyche. That was fascinating.
I've been married 19 years. I haven't done it in a while. First dating. But it's like they were all nice, kind of in like a we're not sure what to make of you kind of thing. Like I had a guy in line, we're waiting. He's just a UCLA fan. He's like, hey, was Penix good at IU? Just like, I'm like, yeah, I mean, like he was kind of hurt a lot, but like obviously, like we went 6-2 in 2020. Like, okay, well, he was pretty good at Washington. I'm like, yeah, he was. Like, but it's just like it's realizing like they have such little knowledge. Just like I don't know a lot about, I haven't keep up with UCLA football much. It was interesting, that dynamic. But the IU fans that were there, I was saying 30%. I don't think it got there. I think it was probably 20 to 25%, but we were engaged. They were loud. They were engaged. IU fans were really into it. And, UCLA fans were there, but they didn't have a lot to cheer for, but definitely they were way more passive and just not as into it as it felt like the IU collective was. So that was really fun, but it was kind of fun building up to that. And then getting to the game and then everyone, kind of just being excited and being into it. It was awesome. And then it got really fun at the end because then all the UCLA fans left with like 7 minutes to go. And we're kind of like, dude, the Rose Bowl's ours. Like IU fans just walking all over the place.
Yeah, there was awesome. It was a really special moment at the end of the game when not all, but most of the IU fans congregated around the tunnel right near where our seats were and saluted the team and Signetti as they came off. I mean, that was really, really special. And yeah, I mean, first of all, I thought IUAA did a great job with that tailgate. That was a really, really nice touch, right? Big, like the whole setup was interesting because all the UCLA fans were, there was a large parking lot where you tailgate in front of the Rose Bowl, and then there's a golf course on the other side of the Rose Bowl. And people were
very LA.
Yeah, and I felt bad, like I'm like driving across this golf course, like hope nobody has a tee time on Tuesday or whatever. But it was, there were tailgates. There were a lot of IU fans kind of sprinkled in among that. But there was this huge tent on your way to get to the stadium, and that was the IUAA event, and that was really, really fun. And there was some, a lot of people there. Jared Jeffries was there. Dean Garrett was there.
Was there.
Yeah.
Scott Dolson was walking around. Give Dolson credit. Like, I mean, it was hot in the sun. He's full, shirt, tie. It's like, dude, you're athletic. Throw on like you can do the coach shirt. Like you don't need to go full shirt and tie. But he was walking around talking to me. It was. I'm with you. It was very cool.
Yeah, and we got to meet a ton of CrimsonCast listeners. Some that we've run into before. Some of you brand new. We got to meet for the first time. That was really special, and got a chance to take some pictures. It was fun seeing everybody out there.
Everybody we met was super nice and had nice things to say. So always appreciate it. If you're gonna talk to us, just be nice. If you have nothing nice to say, just don't talk to us.
Are you gonna mention this on every podcast you do from now on? Like, Scott is firmly in his don't read the comments era. But I will say this.
You're like, you're not reading the comments, but you suck. Like I've been waiting to tell you. Anyway.
I was hoping someone would do that. I almost paid somebody $5 to do it, but I didn't. But I'll say this for those who haven't been to the Rose Bowl, it's a fascinating spot. I mean, the topography around it is beautiful. The mountains right behind it in the background, and you go into the entry gates, and the entry took longer than I think it probably should have, but that's a minor complaint that happens at other stadiums too. And the concourses are all outdoors.
Yeah.
And then
it doesn't really have a profile. Like it's kind of just a couple feet up. It reminds me a little bit like Fenway when you're around Fenway Park, or like it's kind of blends in. Like you don't notice a 100,000 seat stadium next to you. It's very blend-inable.
And it's actually, there's these kind of long, narrow tunnels that you have to take to get into the stadium. And walking through that and then popping out the other side, and you see this amazing view we were seated on the side opposite the press box, so the sun was coming at us for a lot longer than it was the other side. But that was the nice view because you could see the mountains from that side. And so I was glad that we were over there. And it was such a.
The other thing I'll say too is like it felt like they focus on the football. Like for a place that has one of the biggest bowl games ever, there's only two jumbo, I wouldn't even call it jumbotron. It's like one screen to our right. There was one kind of behind us. And what I loved to our left, on the upper side of the, behind one of the end zones was like a really small, it kind of looked like the old scoreboard that IU had in Memorial Stadium, like just lights. It even has the clock with the hand, like not, the analog clock. Like it very much felt like, hey, we're here to focus and watch the football and not get into jumbotron and not have, hot dog cannons. Not saying anything wrong with that, but it was very like, hey, we're here for football.
I highly recommend going to a game there. It really was a lot of fun. And it was just the whole aura of the place was, and I've been to other like historic stadiums. I taught at University of Miami the last year the Orange Bowl was around, and the Orange Bowl was a dump. I mean, it was a dump. It had been so mismanaged and poorly maintained. And the Rose Bowl, a lot of people say, well, it's actually kind of a crappy stadium, and it's not. It's there's not a lot of bells and whistles,
right?
At least outside of the suites. But it was not a dump. It was still a really cool place, and it kind of reminds me of Dodger Stadium. If you've ever been there to watch a baseball game, to quote Jeremy Gray, like it feels like you're in an episode of Mad Men. And the Rose Bowl was kind of like
the outdoor concourses were cool. Like just milling around there was cool. And then from where we were sitting, I was kind of like one section over from you, but like when we were on like the 20-yard line, kind of, the only thing that I did notice is like when the ball was going to the other end zone, I was just like, man, it's really far away. Like when you're Memorial Stadium, it feels tighter. Like then it's like, oh yeah, this place is huge. Like this is a really big place, and it does kind of have an intimate feel until like things are happening on the far side of the field, and you're like, man, that is really far away.
I know it was definitely in that old bowl shape. It reminds me a lot of the Big House. It's a very similar type of build, and they're not that different in age. So
I bumped into a guy in the Vegas airport who had also gone to the game, and he saw the IU stuff. He's like, "Did you go to the game?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What'd you think of the Rose Bowl?" And I was like, "Oh, I really enjoyed it." He's like, "Man," he's like, "It was kind of a dump." It's like, but maybe the most beautiful place I've seen. And I'm like, well, it can't be both. Like, you don't get to be a dump and be like, pick one, bro. Like,
I never felt like we were missing any amenities at the Rose Bowl. I don't know why people call it a dump. I've seen dumps. That's not a dump. Northwestern Stadium is a dump. I mean, I'm sure they'll fix that with the renovation. But yeah, know your facts, right? Yeah. Anyway, the only other thing I'll say, and this was something that kind of struck me when I was in the security line at the airport leaving. Older guy saw my logo and it's like, oh, Indiana. That was a hell of a game last night, and it kind of goes on and on for a bit. And he was like legitimately shocked. And at one point he says, I graduated in 1957, and I'm just, so used to Indiana not winning these kinds of games and things like that. And I got to thinking about that with being at the Rose Bowl too, because I remember like my dad moved to Bloomington in 1964. And so he was here for the season, that 67 season. He was actually a freshman that year at IU, where they made the Rose Bowl. He didn't go. You at that age, you weren't going to go to a game, at least not in the late 60s. And I remember, him growing up, he's really the reason I'm an IU fan. And I remember him talking about that Rose Bowl season and talking about how, he always wanted to go if Indiana ever got back there. So, he passed several years ago. So it was really fun. And I was just kind of really emotional to be there in that moment and think about that and think about the number of people in the IU family who have had some variation of the story that I just told. And these generations of fans that have wanted to go out there and experience it. I brought my family with me. I had my two girls, and we're walking out of there, and I turned to them and I said, you do not realize how lucky you are that you were in the stands here for this, and it doesn't matter if UCLA is bad necessarily, but to be able to go in a game that was not a foregone conclusion, win that way in that venue and be there for history. I mean, that was the first 6 touchdowns scored by IU in Rose Bowl history. You saw them all. it's not a bowl game, but it is a step in the direction towards where IU's program wants to be. And, I thought a lot about the people we talked with, both of us independently. It was so special, especially the older fans, to be able to go to Pasadena, go to the Rose Bowl, and watch IU play. That really was probably the most emotionally resonant thing of the whole weekend for me, Scott.
That's all really well said. I'm gonna pivot because I can't follow. That was very well said. I can't follow that as well. But the thing that I was thinking, and I talked to you about this a little bit, and this is a bit of a scarecrow argument because I think IU is taking football very seriously. But this is why football is so important, is that you can have events like this. And yes, I know that you and I have traveled for basketball games, but it just isn't quite the same. Like there's pregame, like they'll do kind of events for basketball, but it isn't the same. You don't draw people the same. The locations aren't always the same. And you just don't always have that kind of pregame feel. I thought back to going to the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, and that was a really cool event on the water side. And you got all people fired up and went to the Gator Bowl. And, there's really cool venues in the Big Ten to go to. People like to travel to fun places. We're going to be back at USC in like 2027. There'll be a game in, Seattle and Washington. And going to events like this, it also provides a side note. Like my wife and I we started a scholarship at the School of Education for something it's important to us. But, so I went out to dinner with some people from the folks at the School of Education, but it's like this is an event that allows people to it allows the school IU to kind of bring people together and host people and get more donations and things that they need to do to keep going. And that alumni event was a great networking event for I talked to the guy from the School of Ed and he's like, this has been awesome. It's like there's a lot of people I've been trying to meet. I'm able to meet here. For as good as Indiana travels for basketball, it just isn't quite the same. Like when you're going to a game at Auburn or something, like you can kind of do it, but it just isn't the same as this. And I just kind of walk away being like, this is why it's so important that we have positive experiences like this, because now people are more likely to, be like, you know what, that was fun. Like, I want to go to Seattle and see a game in Washington. Like, I at least know IU can, they're not going to win all of them, but they can at least hold their head high and, make themselves proud. And we can travel with them. And like, I'm not scared to go to Iowa again. Things like that. But it is just so important for a university to have a functional team and to have events like this, because I'm always impressed by how many people from IU show out. And I think there's a lot of people in Pasadena who didn't even go to the game, who were just walking around with IU stuff.
Yeah.
And just all the flights, obviously we're flying back to Indiana. So it's going to be a lot of IU folks, but it's just like, you see people there and, we bump into thinking about Ben at the airport. Some I haven't seen in 12 years. It's just, it's such a great moment to bring people together and kind of give you a reason to get there. So that was kind of my main takeaway, is this is why it's so important. And I'm so happy that we're having these moments with IU football.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. I will also leave that one. So,
fever dream time. Let's just fever dream. Come on, let's fever dream it. So,
no, let's wait. I want to hold. I want to end on the note. Let's end on the note we just ended on. Okay. You're right. Cut that. Some nice romantic.
Than I am.
No. We got some nice romantic music playing. The credits are starting to roll. I think let's just lean into that.
All right. Sorry.
It's okay. It's great. Anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap up as again, just an amazing week, an amazing weekend for IU. 3-0 on the season, 42-13 winners at the Rose Bowl against UCLA, and they'll be in action this coming Saturday as they take on Charlotte. We'll have programming throughout the course of the week. Scott, any final thoughts?
No, I think we hit it well.
All right, folks. For Scott, I'm Galen. Thank you to HomeField Apparel. Thank you to Hoosier Game Day Lager, brought to you by Upland Brewing Company. Thanks to everybody that we saw out in Los Angeles, and we look forward to talking with you all again. For Scott, I'm Galen. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. Bring back the Bison. So long, everybody. Goodbye, YouTube.